What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Derek and Cody, with you today. And again, guys, we have another video, this time going over the ceiling and the floor for the Indianapolis Colts. This has kind of been a topic where we've kind of glanced over it, talked about it every once in a while. It's kind of one of those things. But we wanted to kind of do a little more in depth video today on the floor and the ceiling of this team, given the new news and talking about the draft and everything else that's been going on for right now. But Cody, I guess we might as well start with the ceiling of this team. You always want to talk about where you think the highest point of this team can go. This Indianapolis Colts team, who has lost a lot of players, and it is a much more younger team. It was already a young team going into this season. Now it's even younger with a basically first contract team in the secondary and a new rookie quarterback and a bunch of young guys on the offense. And then, we're going into this season with that. How would he end with the schedule being one of the easier ones? I feel like we say that every year, that the Indianapolis Colts always have the easy schedule. So what do you think? What's a ceiling looking like for this team right now?
Well, I think, and also rookie head coach as well, Shane Steichen. So I know there's a tendency, and I know I've fallen into this trap before, even this year, of like thinking, oh, the Colts are going to be this, so they're not going to be this. We just don't know right now with Shane Steichen, right? Good or bad, right? We don't know if the Colts are going to continue struggling in Jacksonville. Like, we don't know if the Colts are going to go on, continue this streak of losing week one games. Like, those are all things that happened in the Frank Reich era. So, these are, I feel like we need to just like reset our expectations in certain ways because, Shane Steichen, we've literally never seen him as a head coach. And so that'll just be interesting. That's definitely a wild card. But I think the biggest wild card, Derek, and the biggest thing that will swing the pendulum one way or the other has to be Anthony Richardson, right? How does he look? Is he the day one starter? If he is, how does he look right away? If not, when does he become that starter? And can you see steady improvement, right? Because I feel like it's kind of all over the place with the Colts. The Colts are one of those teams that's kind of intriguing. You don't really know how to feel about them, right? Because on one hand, you look at them and you say, this team was terrible last year. They won 4 games. They lost to the worst team in football. And, they were just on a downward spiral really the whole season after Frank Reich got fired. But then you look at the other way, and you're like, this team's only a couple years removed from being, had to win 1 of 2 games to make the playoffs. So, like, where does it fall with this team? Now, obviously, this Colts team has, added some talent, has lost some talent as well, more on the defensive side of things as last offseason. So, all that to say, I think it really does depend on Anthony Richardson. How does he look? Does he show improvement? And if he's a little bit more ready than people think he is, like, could the Colts, I think their ceiling would be probably like contending for a wild card spot. And I know some people might be scoffing at that and being like, are you crazy? Like, look what this team did last year. But like, if Anthony Richardson comes out and is looking halfway decent, you never know, man, with what Shane Steichen was able to do with the Philadelphia offense, the things that he was able to get out of some of these guys. We'd all say the Colts they don't have scrubs at the weapons department, right? They still have Jonathan Taylor. They have Michael Pittman, who's due for a bounce back year, who was a really good receiver 2 years ago. He was an ascending player. They have guys like Jelani Woods, Alec Pierce coming in. So they have a lot of young guys, and they have like a few guys that you'd maybe consider veterans. Like, it's crazy to consider JT and Pittman veterans because those guys are in their mid-20s, but like, they have a lot of talent, but they don't have a lot of provenness, right? So really, how does that come down? How does Richardson look? How does Steichen and company develop him? And I see like that the best case scenario is like he has his moments, but he looks a lot better than maybe we initially think. He's not as raw as some people think. He's not like what Malik Willis looked like last year, right? Like, he's actually looks like halfway decent. And we don't expect him to come out and, have a rookie of the year campaign. Maybe he does. And that might be like, he might be in contention for that at that point. But I think that would kind of be the ceiling, is if Anthony Richardson hits the ground running from year one. shows a lot of good positive signs, and you feel like, man, he's on the cusp here in year 2, year 3, and moving forward of being that guy and being a dominant quarterback in this league. So I'd say year 1, we got to temper expectations a little bit. But best case scenario for me would be, contending for a wild card spot, probably. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I definitely agree. I think wild card is definitely not out of the question. The only question is, what record do the Colts need to achieve in order to actually get a wild card spot? Because, we know that the AFC is very loaded right now. It is the conference to beat right now. I mean, there are legitimately 6 or 7 teams right now that have a somewhat chance to go to a Super Bowl, and that's very impressive because it was the NFC for the longest time. So when you go into it now and you're seeing this and you're thinking, what's the ceiling for this team? The best way I try to evaluate it is I try to think back to what the Eagles were in 2021 with a basically second year Jalen Hurts, but Jalen Hurts having his first full year under Shane Steichen as the offensive coordinator and calling somewhat of the plays, and a team that, kind of lacked direction at first, and then they kind of figured it out. Right. I think they won 10 games that year. Now, I will definitely say that I will sit here and say they do not have I don't think that they win 10 games this year because of the fact that they're not as, I don't think they're as experienced in the main areas that they need to be. They're very experienced in the trenches and they're very experienced in the linebacker group. But outside of that, this team is as young as you can possibly get from all the skill positions standpoint, from the secondary to the wide receivers to the tight ends to the quarterback and to the running backs. Outside of Jonathan Taylor being the veteran that we know Jonathan Taylor can be. At least that's in my view. So I think the ceiling is about, 9 games with this team, because 9, I'd say it's hard for me to sit here and say that I think they win 10 games. It could be a possibility, but a lot of things would have to go in our favor in order for that to happen. And who knows? Maybe the Indianapolis Colts are way further along than they think. Maybe Shane Steichen, midway through the year, has this team at 4, maybe 5 wins, and then they go on a crazy win streak at the end of the year with Anthony Richardson figuring out how the NFL speed is, and then maybe the system starts working better at that time. But that's a big pipe dream there. So 10 wins at most for me. His team is still just so young when you look at it, and it's going to take a lot for this team to get better. But then when you look at the ceiling now, we temper expectations. We go back down to a floor. Now, I think, Cody, we can definitely say that the absolute floor would probably end up being, in my opinion, probably 5 games, because I don't see how this team loses the same number, if not more games this year than what they did last year. Last year's team with an incompetent head coach, a terrible quarterback, a horrendous offensive line, and no receiver help, your best player getting injured, all of these coaching change in the middle of the year, everyone only caring about losing games. I don't see that being this year's Colts team. And they somehow still won 4 games last year. So my floor for this team is 5 games. I think that the 5 wins is the floor for them, because this team still has a lot to go. But I think that this is a team that is going to be much better coached, and a team that's going to be different than how other teams are used to defending them. So it's going to throw a few more teams off guard. So 5 wins is the floor for me. What do you say for that?
Well, so this was something that I was going to also add to so I guess I can incorporate here. I was going to add to kind of the ceiling, but I guess I can incorporate it in kind of both ways here. When it comes to the division, right, and the teams you're going to be playing, I mean, this team, for how bad they were last year overall, I mean, they did beat Jacksonville one time, right? Somehow, some way, they beat Jacksonville in Indianapolis. As bad as they've been in Jacksonville, they won somehow. So like, is that a possibility? I know Jacksonville kind of got hot at the end of the year, but like, it's a new year, so you never know. Like, Jacksonville could continue to show some struggles. So I guess my thing is, like, I look at the division. Houston's really not scaring you. I mean, of course, Houston did beat the Colts to end the season, but like, Houston's nothing special. Tennessee's kind of the wheels are falling off there. So I see, potentially, and I'm not going to say they're going to win all these, but like, potentially 4 games there that are pretty winnable. So you already are at 4 wins. So for me, I kind of fall probably 6 wins. That's kind of where I kind of was thinking, just because I think you'll win at least 2 or 3 of those divisional games, if not more, pretty easily. And, you have a couple other teams as well, right? Like Tampa Bay, for example, and a few of those teams. And, the Colts, I feel like every year the Colts just randomly beat a team that they shouldn't have beat, just out of the blue. Like, like a couple years ago, they just trounced the Buffalo Bills out of nowhere. Like, that kind of stuff. Now last year, I mean, like Kansas City last year, like that kind of stuff happened. So I could see them doing that once or twice, and kind of end up around that 6-win category, because I do think even if they do start off kind of slow, like, you're right. If Anthony Richardson can, like, and Shane Steichen, they can just continue to grow together, I can see the Colts, while they probably won't be contending for a playoff spot at that point, if it does go bad at the beginning of the year, like, I could see them reel off a couple wins by the end of the year, and Richardson's looking pretty good. And you're like, okay, like, this year didn't really matter if Richardson's looking good, right? So I would say the floor for me is probably 6 wins, just because of the nature of the division. I think it's still one of the worst, if not the worst division in football right now. And so, anything can really happen in those divisional games. I'm not saying they're going to win them all, but like, it's a real possibility they could. So that's kind of where I stand, I guess, when it comes to the floor for Indianapolis, just because of the nature of the division. And like you said, kind of an easier schedule in some ways. Some teams that you'd probably look on paper and say, Colts are probably a little bit better than them. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite possible. I mean, there's just no telling what this team's going to do this year because of just so many new moving parts. Needless to say, at the end of the day, Colts Nation, for the most part, is very excited. It's a new direction, it's a new change in the scenery, and gives Colts fans hope that there is some light at the end of this tunnel, and the end of that tunnel being a Lombardi trophy. So we'll see how it goes, but that's going to do it for this one, guys. That's the high ceiling and the floor for the Indianapolis Colts in 2023. Let us know your thoughts on their ceiling and floor for the upcoming season. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for all the support. And as always, guys, go Colts.